Hello, dear listener. Welcome to this quiet corner of the magical world, where time moves slowly and stories unfold like petals opening in moonlight. Tonight, we journey together through a tale you may have heard before, but perhaps never quite like this. A story of a boy who lived, who loved, and who became a hero not through strength alone, but through the quiet power of choice, friendship, and sacrifice. This is the story of Harry Potter, told gently, told softly, told in the way bedtime stories should be told, with wonder instead of worry, with hope instead of haste. So settle yourself comfortably, dear listener. Let your breathing slow. Let the day's concerns drift away like morning mist over the black lake. We begin, as all the best stories do, with a night that changed everything. The evening of October 31st, 1981, started like any other in the quiet village of Godric's Hollow. Autumn leaves whispered secrets to the cobblestone streets. Jack-o'-lanterns flickered on doorsteps, their carved faces grinning cheerfully at passers-by. Inside a small cottage surrounded by an ancient garden, a young family prepared for an ordinary evening, though nothing about this family or this evening would prove ordinary at all. James Potter sat cross-legged on the living room floor, making toy broomsticks zoom and dive for his son's delight. His glasses caught the firelight as he laughed, that same infectious laugh that had echoed through Hogwarts halls not so many years before. Lily Potter watched from the doorway, her green eyes, those remarkable green eyes, soft with love as she observed her two favorite people in all the world. And between them, giggling with pure joy, sat baby Harry, his dark hair already impossibly messy, reaching tiny hands toward the enchanted toys that danced just beyond his grasp. It was a moment of perfect, simple happiness. The kind of moment that glows golden in memory, that feels suspended outside of time itself. Little did they know how precious this ordinary evening would become, how it would be remembered and retold for generations. Little did they know that history itself was holding its breath, waiting at their garden gate. The knock, when it came, was not really a knock at all. It was more like the world cracking open. The protective enchantments around the cottage, those careful, powerful spells, shattered like glass. Cold air rushed in, carrying with it a darkness that seemed to swallow all warmth, all light, all hope. Lord Voldemort, the darkest wizard of the age, had found them at last. What happened next would echo through the wizarding world for decades to come, though we need not dwell on the violence of it, dear listener. Instead, let us focus on what truly mattered that night. Not the curse that killed James Potter as he stood defending his family, not the terror of those final moments, but rather the extraordinary thing that happened when a mother's love met the darkest magic ever known. Lily Potter stood before her son's crib with no wand, no weapon, nothing but her fierce, unwavering love. When Voldemort demanded she step aside, she refused. 3 times she was offered her life. 3 times she chose her son instead. And when the killing curse left Voldemort's wand, that terrible green light that had ended so many lives, it met something it had never encountered before. A love so pure, so powerful, so absolute that it could not be overcome. The curse rebounded. The cottage exploded with magical force. And when the dust settled and the dark magic faded, baby Harry remained alive in his crib, crying softly, marked forever by a lightning bolt scar on his forehead. Beside him, Lily lay still, her sacrifice complete. her love now woven permanently into her son's very being, a protection that would follow him, shelter him, and ultimately save not just him, but the entire wizarding world. Hagrid found him there, in the rubble, still crying, still alive, the boy who lived. The half-giant gamekeeper wept as he lifted the child gently from his crib, wrapping him in blankets that smelled of wood smoke and pumpkin. Through the night sky they flew on Sirius Black's enchanted motorcycle, Harry sleeping peacefully against Hagrid's chest, unaware that he had just become the most famous wizard in the world, unaware that his name would be spoken with wonder and hope wherever magical folk gathered, unaware of everything except the warmth of the giant arms holding him safe. And so Harry came to Privet Drive. Number 4, Privet Drive was the very opposite of magical. It was aggressively, determinedly, proudly ordinary. The houses stood in neat rows, their lawns precisely trimmed, their curtains perfectly hung. The Dursleys who lived at number 4 prided themselves on being perfectly normal. Thank you very much. Vernon Dursley, large and blustering, sold drills for a living and considered it an honest, sensible occupation. Petunia Dursley, thin and sharp-featured, spent her days keeping an immaculate house and watching the neighbours. Their son, Dudley, was doted upon and indulged in every conceivable way. Into this world of determined normality, Harry Potter arrived on a doorstep one November morning, accompanied by a letter from Albus Dumbledore explaining, as well as such things can be explained, why Lily's sacrifice meant her son must grow up here, protected by blood magic, in the care of the only family he had left. The cupboard under the stairs became Harry's world. It was a small space, cramped and dark, filled with spiders and dust and old cleaning supplies. His bed was a thin mattress. His belongings fit in a single box. From this tiny room, he could hear the Dursleys' lives happening above and around him. Footsteps, television, laughter that never included him, meals he would eat only the remnants of. But listen, dear listener, to what truly matters. Even here, in this small dark space, Harry dreamed. He dreamed of flying. He dreamed of a motorcycle soaring through starlight, though he couldn't remember why. He dreamed of green light and a woman's voice, loving and desperate, though he didn't know the voice belonged to his mother. The dreams came back night after night, persistent as magic itself, reminding him that he was more than this cupboard, more than these cold relatives, more than the unwanted burden they claimed he was. The Dursleys told him his parents died in a car crash. They told him he was lucky they took him in. They told him not to ask questions, especially not strange questions, especially not questions about unusual things that couldn't possibly exist. But children know, don't they? Deep down, Harry knew there was something more, something waiting, something that made him different in ways he couldn't name but could feel in his bones. Strange things happened around Harry Potter. Oh, not dramatic things. Nothing that called attention, nothing that could be proven, but small impossibilities that appeared and vanished like morning dew. Once, when Aunt Petunia had tried to force him into an ugly hand-me-down sweater, it had shrunk in her hands until it was too small for a doll. Once, when Dudley and his gang chased him through the school playground, Harry had somehow ended up on the roof, sitting beside a chimney, with no memory of how he'd gotten there. Once, when he'd been dreading a terrible haircut, his hair had grown back overnight, exactly as messy as before. The Dursleys punished him for these occurrences, naturally. They blamed him, scolded him, sent him to his cupboard without supper. But secretly, oh so secretly, Harry felt a small thrill each time something impossible happened. It meant the world was bigger than Privet Drive. It meant that perhaps, just perhaps, there was magic in the world after all. On his 11th birthday, everything changed. But let us not rush, dear listener. Let us savor this moment just before transformation, this breath before the plunge. Harry didn't know, as he woke that morning in his cupboard, that this was the last day of his old life. He didn't know that letters had been trying to reach him for days, hundreds of letters, thousands of letters, flooding into number 4 Privet Drive despite every effort to stop them. He didn't know that his name was already famous in a world he'd never heard of, that people knew his story, that mothers pointed out his lightning scar to their children and told them about the night he survived. All he knew was that he was 11 years old, alone, and trying not to hope for too much. The Dursleys fled to a hut on a rock in the sea, trying desperately to escape the mysterious letters. Harry found himself in a cold, damp shelter, listening to waves crash against stone, watching Dudley snore on the one decent bed while he curled up on the floor with only a thin blanket. He drew a birthday cake in the dust and sang quietly to himself, a lonely tradition, but his own. And then, at the stroke of midnight, came the knock that would change everything. Boom, boom, boom. The door rattled on its hinges. Uncle Vernon appeared with a rifle, as if a rifle could stop what was coming. The door crashed open, and there stood the largest man Harry had ever seen. Nearly twice as tall as a normal man, with wild hair and a wild beard, wearing a coat made of what appeared to be overlapping patches, and carrying an aura of warmth, earth, and absolute safety. "Sorry about that," rumbled the giant, stepping carefully through the doorway and bending the door back into place with one massive hand. His beetle-black eyes found Harry, and his whole face split into the gentlest smile. "You look just like your dad, Harry, but you've got your mum's eyes." 3 sentences. That was all it took for Harry's world to shift on its axis. This stranger, this impossible, wonderful stranger, knew his parents, remembered them, spoke of them with familiarity and fondness. Harry's heart hammered in his chest. "Who are you?" he whispered. "Rubeus Hagrid, keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts. You'll know all about Hogwarts, of course." No," said Harry. What followed was revelation after revelation, each one landing like a shooting star in Harry's consciousness. He was a wizard. His parents hadn't died in a car crash. They'd been murdered by the darkest wizard in a century. His scar wasn't from a car accident. It was from a curse that should have killed him. He was famous. He was going to a school for magic. He had a destiny waiting for him. The Dursleys' protests faded to nothing against Hagrid's certainty. When Uncle Vernon dared to insult Harry's parents, to call his mother a freak, Hagrid's magic flared, giving Dudley a pig's tail. It shouldn't have been funny, perhaps, but Harry couldn't help the small smile that crept across his face. For the first time in his life, someone had defended him. For the first time, someone had suggested he was special rather than strange, wanted rather than unwanted, magical rather than wrong. Hagrid presented him with a slightly squashed birthday cake, the first birthday cake Harry had ever received, and Harry felt something warm and bright unfold in his chest. It was hope, he realized. Pure, undiluted hope. The kind of hope that had been sleeping in that cupboard under the stairs all these years, waiting for exactly this moment. As Hagrid talked about Diagon Alley and wands and Hogwarts, Harry listened with every fibre of his being. The storm outside continued its rage against the hut, but inside, Harry felt warmer than he ever had in the Dursleys' house. This giant of a man, with his kind eyes and his broken umbrella hiding a secret wand, represented something Harry had never dared believe in, a place where he belonged. "You're a wizard, Harry," Hagrid said again, as if knowing Harry needed to hear it more than once, needed to let it sink deep into his bones. And Harry, who had spent 11 years being told he was a burden, being told he was nothing, being told not to ask questions, Harry felt the truth of those words resonate through him like a bell being struck. Yes, this made sense. This explained everything. This was the answer to all those strange happenings, all those impossible moments, all those dreams of flying. So ends our first chapter, dear listener. Harry Potter, no longer just the unwanted boy in the cupboard, but a wizard with a destiny, sits in a hut on a rock in the sea, eating birthday cake and learning that his life is about to begin. Tomorrow, he will see Diagon Alley for the first time. Tomorrow, he will meet the magical world. Tomorrow, everything will be different. But tonight is for wonder. Tonight is for that moment between the old life and the new, that breath before the transformation, that pause where anything becomes possible. Let us leave Harry there, warm and hopeful, with the storm singing outside and magic shimmering in the air around him. Let us rest here, in this moment of perfect possibility. Sleep well, dear listener. Tomorrow, the adventure begins. Harry woke to the sound of tapping, gentle, persistent tapping on the window. For a moment, he thought he'd dreamed everything. The cupboard under the stairs, the letters, Hagrid. Surely it had all been one of those vivid dreams that felt more real than waking life. But then he opened his eyes and saw the giant man sleeping in a chair far too small for him, coat pulled over his massive frame like a blanket, snoring peacefully. And at the window, an owl, a real owl, tapped its beak against the glass, a newspaper clutched in its talons. Harry's heart soared. It was real. All of it was wonderfully, impossibly real. The journey back to London passed in a blur of questions and answers. Hagrid, patient and kind despite his obvious exhaustion, told Harry about the wizarding world, about Gringotts, the goblin-run bank buried deep beneath London, about the Ministry of Magic, hidden in plain sight, about Platform 9 3/4, invisible to muggles, about 100 small wonders that made Harry's head spin with delight. "What's Quidditch?" Harry asked at one point, stumbling over the unfamiliar word. Hagrid's eyes lit up. "It's our sport, Harry, played on broomsticks. You'll love it. Everyone does. Flying around, chasing the quaffle, avoiding bludgers, trying to catch the golden snitch. Your dad was a brilliant seeker. He was." Each mention of his parents made Harry lean forward eagerly. These weren't the cold silences of the Dursleys or the dismissive insults he'd grown up with. These were real memories, spoken with affection and respect. His father had been good at sports. His mother had been clever and kind. They had been loved. They had mattered. And so had he. The leaky cauldron appeared between a bookshop and a record store on a busy London street, visible only to those who knew how to look. It was dark and shabby and absolutely perfect, the kind of place that seemed to exist outside of time, where magic settled into the very walls. The moment Hagrid pushed open the door, conversation stopped. Heads turned, and Harry experienced for the first time what it meant to be famous. "Bless my soul," whispered the bartender, Tom. "Harry Potter." The name rippled through the pub like wind through tall grass. Everyone wanted to shake his hand, to welcome him, to tell him how delighted they were to meet him. A pale young man with a turban. Professor Quirrell, Hagrid explained later, stammered his greetings. Doris Crockford told him she'd always wanted to meet him. People pressed forward, beaming, as if Harry had done something extraordinary simply by existing. Harry felt overwhelmed, bewildered, and strangely touched all at once. These people, these witches and wizards, they looked at him with admiration, with warmth, with something that felt almost like love. It was so different from the Dursleys' cold disdain that Harry hardly knew how to respond, except to smile shyly and shake hand after hand after hand. But Hagrid, bless him, noticed Harry's discomfort and gently steered him through the pub to the walled courtyard behind it. Rain had left everything glistening and fresh. Hagrid tapped a pattern on the brick wall with his umbrella, 3 up, 2 across, and stepped back. The wall began to move. Bricks shifted and slid, rearranging themselves until an archway appeared, growing wider and wider, revealing the street beyond. And what a street it was. Diagon Alley stretched before them like something from a dream. Shops lined the cobblestone street, their windows displaying wonders Harry had never imagined. Cauldrons of brass, copper, and silver hung outside one store. Telescopes and strange silver instruments gleamed in another. Owls of every colour perched in the window of Elop's Owl Emporium, hooting softly. The air smelled of herbs and parchment, and something indefinably magical, like thunderstorms and Christmas morning and ancient libraries all blended together. People in robes and pointed hats walked past, deep in conversation. A small boy pressed his face against the window of Quality Quidditch Supplies, eyes wide with longing. 2 witches compared cauldrons outside Potage's cauldron shop. Somewhere, someone was laughing. Somewhere else, an owl hooted. Everything was strange and wonderful, and exactly right. "First things first," Hagrid said, leading Harry down the street. Gringotts. The bank rose white and imposing above the other buildings, with bronze doors and a goblin in a scarlet uniform standing guard. Harry had never seen a goblin before. The small creature, with the clever, dark eyes and long fingers, was both frightening and fascinating. Inside, the vast marble hall gleamed with torchlight. More goblins sat on high stools, weighing coins, examining jewels, making notes in enormous ledgers. Everything spoke of ancient magic and older gold. Harry learned he had money. More money than he'd ever dreamed of, left by his parents in Vault 687. The cart ride down into the depths of Gringotts was like the world's best roller coaster, whipping through underground passages, past lakes and caverns, deeper and deeper into the earth. When they stopped at his vault and the door swung open, Harry saw piles of gold galleons, silver sickles, and bronze knuts gleaming in the lamplight. His parents had left this for him. They'd made sure he would be provided for, even though they couldn't be there themselves. Harry felt a lump in his throat as he filled his bag with coins, handling them carefully, reverently. This wasn't just money. It was love, converted into gold, stretching across the years to care for him still. They descended even deeper to Vault 7113, where Hagrid retrieved a small grubby package wrapped in brown paper, refusing to tell Harry what it contained. "Hogwarts business," he said firmly. "Very secret. Best not to mention this to anyone, Harry." The mystery intrigued Harry, but he was too dazzled by everything else to press the question. Back in the sunshine of Diagon Alley, they began the delightful process of acquiring his school supplies. Uniform robes from Madame Malkin's, where Harry was measured by floating tape measures and stood beside another boy his own age, pale, with a pointed face, already talking about Quidditch and houses in a drawling, superior voice that reminded Harry uncomfortably of Dudley. Books from Flourish and Blots, where Harry could have spent hours running his fingers over leather spines and reading titles like A History of Magic and Magical Theory and 1,000 Magical Herbs and Fungi. Potion ingredients from the apothecary, where jars of pickled eyes and dried nettles lined the walls. A cauldron, pewter scales, a telescope for astronomy. Each purchase made it more real. He was going to Hogwarts. He was going to learn magic. He was going to be a wizard. But the best, the most wonderful moment of all, came when they entered Ollivanders, makers of fine wands, since 382 BC. The shop was narrow, dusty, and absolutely silent, except for the occasional soft creak of old wood. Thousands of narrow boxes were piled to the ceiling, each containing a wand, waiting patiently for its match. The air felt charged with possibility, with old magic, with the weight of countless spells cast over countless years. "Good afternoon," said a soft voice, and an old man appeared from between the shelves. Mr. Ollivander, with pale eyes that seemed to look right through Harry and see something deeper than skin and bone. "Ah, yes," said Mr. Ollivander. Yes. I thought I'd be seeing you soon. Harry Potter." His eyes fixed on Harry's scar. "You have your mother's eyes. It seems only yesterday she was in here herself, buying her first wand, 10¼ inches long, swishy, made of willow. Nice wand for charm work." He moved closer, measuring Harry, his arm, his height, the distance between his eyes and the floor. "Your father, on the other hand, favored a mahogany wand, 11 inches, pliable, a little more power, and excellent for transfiguration." "Well, I say your father favored it. It's really the wand that chooses the wizard, of course." Harry stood very still, absorbing every word. Mr. Ollivander remembered his parents, remembered them as children, as students, as young people choosing their wands. It made them feel more real, more present, as if they were standing just behind him, watching him take this important step. The wand-choosing process was more complex than Harry expected. Mr. Ollivander pulled down box after box, handing Harry wand after wand. Some felt wrong immediately, cold or heavy, or simply not right. One produced a shower of sparks that singed Hagrid's beard. Another exploded a vase on a nearby shelf. Mr. Ollivander seemed delighted by each failure, murmuring things like, no, definitely not, and curious, and I wonder. Finally, he climbed high up a ladder and pulled down a box that looked older than the others, its wood dark with age. "I wonder," he said quietly, opening it with careful fingers. "Yes, why not? Unusual combination. Holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches, nice and supple." The moment Harry's fingers closed around the wand, he felt it. Warmth spread from his palm up his arm, filling his chest with golden light. The wand hummed with recognition, with rightness, with home. Red and gold sparks shot from the tip, cascading around the shop like fireworks, like celebration, like the wand was singing with joy at finding its wizard at last. "Oh, bravo!" cried Mr. Ollivander. "Yes, indeed. Oh, very good. Well, well, well. How curious. How very curious. Sorry, said Harry. But what's curious? Mr. Ollivander's pale eyes seemed to glow in the dim light. I remember every wand I've ever sold, Mr. Potter. Every single wand. It so happens that the phoenix whose tail feather is in your wand gave another feather, just one other. It is very curious indeed that you should be destined for this wand when its brother gave you that scar. A chill ran down Harry's spine. His wand was connected to Voldemort's wand, the wand that had killed his parents, the wand that had tried to kill him. Mr. Ollivander seemed to sense his discomfort and patted his shoulder gently. The wand chooses the wizard, remember, he said kindly. It's not always clear why, but I think it is clear that we can expect great things from you, Mr. Potter. After all, he who must not be named did great things. Terrible, yes, but great. They left the shop in silence, Harry clutching his wand, feeling its warmth through the box, feeling the connection between them humming like a plucked string. Hagrid, perhaps sensing Harry needed a distraction from heavy thoughts, steered him toward Elop's Owl Emporium. You'll need a familiar, Hagrid said. Most students bring an owl, or a cat, or a toad. What do you fancy? The owls hooted and ruffled, their feathers as Harry walked past their cages. Barn owls, tawny owls, screech owls, all beautiful, all appealing. But then Harry saw her, a snowy owl with amber eyes, sitting apart from the others, watching him with what looked like patience, like she'd been waiting for him. That one, Harry said immediately. The owl clicked her beak once, almost approvingly. When the shopkeeper opened her cage, she stepped onto Harry's arm with perfect grace, her talons gentle, her weight surprisingly light. She looked at him with those intelligent amber eyes, and Harry felt the same sense of rightness he'd felt with his wand. This owl was meant to be his, and he was meant to be hers. I'll call you Hedwig, he told her, remembering the name from a book he'd once read at school. She gave a soft hoot that sounded like approval. As the day drew toward evening, Hagrid took Harry to a small cafe where they sat outside and ate ice cream while people passed by doing their magical shopping. Harry couldn't stop looking around, couldn't stop marveling that this world existed, that he belonged to it, that he wasn't strange or wrong, but magical and wanted. Hagrid, Harry said quietly, why did you know who want to kill me? Hagrid's expression grew troubled. I don't rightly know, Harry. You were just a baby. Maybe he saw you as a threat. There was a prophecy, some say, though no one knows what it said. Maybe he just wanted to wipe out anyone who might oppose him. Or maybe... He trailed off, looking pained. Maybe what? Maybe your mum's sacrifice did something beyond what anyone understood. Love, Harry. Your mum loved you so much she died for you. That kind of love leaves a mark, not a scar you can see, but something deeper. It's old magic, very powerful, very rare. It's why you know who couldn't kill you then, and it's why he can't touch you now. Harry touched his scar, thinking. He'd spent 11 years believing he was unwanted, unloved, a burden to be endured. But his mother had loved him enough to die for him. His father had died protecting them both, and that love was still with him, woven into his very being, protecting him even now. You'll be safe at Hogwarts, Hagrid continued. Dumbledore's there. There isn't a safer place in all the wizarding world. You'll learn magic, make friends, find where you belong. It'll be the best years of your life, Harry. Mark my words. As the sun set over Diagon Alley, painting the cobblestones gold and amber, Hagrid helped Harry gather his purchases. The school trunk, the robes, the books, the cauldron, the wand, and Hedwig in her cage. Everything Harry would need for his new life. They made their way back through the leaky cauldron, through the brick wall that closed behind them, back into the Muggle world. But Harry wasn't returning to the Dursleys as the same boy who'd left. He was a wizard now. He had a wand that chose him, an owl that belonged to him, and a place waiting for him at a school for magic. The next few weeks at Privet Drive would be bearable because he knew they were temporary, knew that on September 1st he would board the Hogwarts Express and leave that old life behind forever. Hagrid left him at the Dursleys' door with a one-way ticket to Hogwarts and a warm hug that lifted Harry's feet off the ground. "See you soon, Harry," the giant man said, his beetle black eyes bright with affection. "September the 1st, King's Cross Station. You'll do great, I know it." The door closed behind Harry, and he stood in the hallway of number 4 Privet Drive, surrounded by his magical supplies, feeling more hopeful than he had in all his 11 years. The Dursleys would complain, he knew. They would be angry and frightened and try to make him feel small again. But they couldn't, not anymore. Harry Potter was a wizard, and in just a few weeks he would go to Hogwarts and learn to become the wizard he was meant to be. That night, in his cupboard under the stairs, Harry lay awake long after the house fell silent. Hedwig dozed in her cage, occasionally ruffling her snowy feathers. His wand lay beside him in its box, humming so quietly only Harry could sense it. Tomorrow he would count his gold again, read his school books, practice saying spell names under his breath. Tomorrow he would begin preparing for his new life. But tonight, he simply lay there, touching his scar, thinking about his mother's love and his father's bravery, about phoenixes and prophecies, and the strange destiny waiting for him in the halls of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Sleep well, dear listener. Our young wizard has crossed the threshold. The magical world has opened its arms to welcome him home. And soon, very soon, the Hogwarts Express will carry him toward the adventure of a lifetime, toward friendship and challenge, toward the discovery of who Harry Potter truly is. Rest now, as Harry rests, dreaming of flying and magic, and a place where he finally belongs. September first arrived with a mixture of nervousness and excitement that made Harry's stomach flutter like a caged snitch. The Dursleys, predictably unpleasant, dropped him at King's Cross Station and drove away without a backward glance, leaving Harry alone with his trunk, his owl, and a ticket that mentioned a platform that didn't seem to exist. Platform 9, Platform 10, but no Platform 9 3/4. Harry was beginning to panic when he heard a voice, a wonderfully warm, motherly voice, mentioning Muggles and Hogwarts, a family of redheads all talking at once, wheeling trunks toward the barrier between platforms 9 and 10. Harry followed, hope rising in his chest. "Excuse me," he said shyly to the plump woman shepherding the group. "Could you tell me how to get onto the platform?" She finished kindly. Her eyes were warm, her smile genuine. "Not to worry, dear. All you do is walk straight at the barrier between platforms 9 and 10. Don't stop and don't be scared you'll crash into it. That's very important. Best do it at a bit of a run if you're nervous." And so Harry ran at a solid barrier, his heart in his throat, his trunk rattling, and passed through as easily as passing through smoke. Platform 9 3/4 stretched before him, crowded with students and parents, owls hooting, cats yowling, trunks being loaded onto the gleaming scarlet train that stood waiting, steam billowing from its chimney like patient breath. The Hogwarts Express. Harry found a compartment and settled by the window, watching families say goodbye, watching the organized chaos of departure. And then a boy appeared in the doorway, one of the redheads from the platform, tall and gangly with a smudge on his nose. "Anyone sitting there?" he asked, pointing to the seat opposite Harry. "Everywhere else is full." "No," said Harry. "Go ahead." And just like that, Harry Potter made his first real friend. Ron Weasley was funny, loyal, slightly insecure, and utterly genuine. They bonded over chocolate frog cards, and Bertie Bott's every flavor beans. Ron warned him away from the vomit-flavored ones. Ron told him about his family. 5 older brothers, all successful in their own ways, making Ron feel like he had impossibly big shoes to fill. Harry told Ron about the Dursleys, though he left out the worst parts. Some things were still too tender to share. The door slid open again, revealing a girl with bushy brown hair and an earnest expression. "Has anyone seen a toad? Neville's lost one." When they said they hadn't, she noticed Ron attempting a spell, badly, and proceeded to demonstrate a perfect Lumos charm, fixing Harry's broken glasses with an oculus reparo that left both boys staring in amazement. Hermione Granger was bossy, brilliant, and clearly desperate to prove she belonged in this magical world despite being Muggle-born. Harry liked her immediately, though he could tell Ron was less certain. The train journey passed in a blur of countryside and conversation, of sweets and laughter, and the gradually building excitement as they drew closer to Hogwarts. When the call came to change into their robes, Harry felt a thrill run through him. This was really happening. He was really going to Hogwarts. The castle rose against the night sky like something from a fairy tale, its many turrets and towers silhouetted against the stars, windows glowing with warm light. The first years crossed the lake in small boats, Hagrid's voice booming reassurance across the water, and with each stroke of the oars, Harry felt he was rowing toward his destiny, toward home, toward everything he'd been searching for without knowing he was searching. The entrance hall was magnificent, vast and lit by torches, with a marble staircase leading upward and the sound of hundreds of voices echoing from behind great double doors. Professor McGonagall, stern and straight-backed in emerald robes, explained about the house system. Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. 4 houses, 4 sets of values, 4 possible homes within Hogwarts. And then they entered the Great Hall. Harry would never forget that first sight. The ceiling enchanted to mirror the sky outside, floating candles illuminating 4 long tables crowded with students, the staff table at the front, and in the center of it all, Professor Dumbledore, watching the first years with eyes that seemed to twinkle with both wisdom and mischief. The Sorting Hat sang its song, warning and welcoming in equal measure. Then the names began to be called. Abbot Hannah became a Hufflepuff. Boot Terry went to Ravenclaw. Granger, Hermione, sat for nearly a minute before the hat shouted Gryffindor, and Hermione scurried to the table amid cheers. Potter, Harry. The whispers started immediately. Potter, did she say? The Harry Potter? Harry walked forward on shaking legs and sat on the stool, feeling the hat drop over his eyes, plunging him into darkness. Said a small voice in his ear. Difficult, very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind either. There's talent. Oh my goodness, yes. And a nice thirst to prove yourself. Now that's interesting. So where shall I put you? Not Slytherin, Harry thought desperately, remembering that Voldemort had been in Slytherin, remembering the pale, drawling boy from Madame Malkin's who'd sneered about Muggleborns. Not Slytherin, eh? Are you sure? You could be great, you know. It's all here in your head, and Slytherin will help you on the way to greatness. No doubt about that. No? Well, if you're sure, better be Gryffindor. The last word echoed through the hall, and the Gryffindor table erupted in cheers. Harry walked toward them in a daze, people shaking his hand, the Weasley twins shouting, "We got Potter! We got Potter!" Relief and joy flooded through him. He belonged somewhere. He had a house, a table, a place to sit where people wanted him. Ron joined him moments later, and when the sorting was finished and Dumbledore stood to speak, saying merely, "Nitwit, blubber, oddment, tweak," before sitting back down, Harry laughed with genuine happiness for the first time in memory. The feast that followed was magnificent. Roast beef, roast chicken, pork chops, lamb chops, sausages, bacon, steak, boiled potatoes, roast potatoes, chips, Yorkshire puddings, peas, carrots, gravy, ketchup. And then the desserts, blocks of ice cream in every flavour, apple pies, treacle tarts, chocolate eclairs, jam donuts, trifle, strawberries. Harry ate until he thought he might burst, talking with Ron and Hermione and the other first years, learning about Quidditch positions and wizard duels and all the wonderful, impossible things that were now part of his everyday life. That first night in Gryffindor Tower, in the dormitory he shared with Ron, Neville, Dean and Seamus, Harry lay in a 4-poster bed with velvet curtains, looking up at the ceiling and thinking about how much had changed. A month ago, he'd been sleeping in a cupboard under the stairs. Now he was in a castle, in a room with friends, about to begin learning magic. The years that followed would be filled with wonder, challenge, and discovery that unfolded like the petals of a magical flower, each year revealing new depths to the wizarding world and to Harry himself. First year brought the mystery of the Philosopher's Stone. Classes were harder than Harry expected, but infinitely more interesting than anything at his Muggle school. Charms with tiny Professor Flitwick, who fell off his stack of books in excitement when he called Harry's name. Transfiguration with the stern but fair Professor McGonagall, who could become a cat and expected excellence from her students. Potions in the dungeons with Professor Snape, whose hatred of Harry was immediate, visceral, and utterly bewildering. Defense against the dark arts with the nervous, stammering Professor Quirrell, who smelled faintly of garlic and couldn't seem to meet anyone's eyes. Harry discovered he had a gift for flying. When Madame Hooch's class took to the air on broomsticks, Harry felt like he'd been born to fly. The wind in his hair, the ground falling away beneath him, the feeling of absolute freedom and rightness. When he caught Neville's Remembrall in a death-defying dive that should have gotten him expelled, Professor McGonagall instead made him seeker for the Gryffindor Quidditch team, the youngest house player in a century. The Golden Trio, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, formed properly on Halloween night, when a mountain troll got into the dungeons and the boys rescued Hermione from the girls' bathroom. Her lie to protect them from punishment cemented their friendship. From that day forward, they were inseparable. But beneath the everyday magic of classes and Quidditch and slowly improving friendships, a mystery lurked. The three-headed dog guarding a trapdoor on the 3rd floor. The package retrieved from Gringotts, now hidden at Hogwarts. Snape's apparent attempts to curse Harry during Quidditch matches. Someone was after the Philosopher's Stone, the legendary artifact that produced the elixir of life, and Harry, Ron, and Hermione were determined to stop them. The journey through the trapdoor that June night tested each of them. Ron sacrificed himself in the most dangerous game of wizard's chess ever played, staying behind to ensure Harry could continue. Hermione solved Snape's logic puzzle, her brilliant mind cutting through confusion to find the path forward. And Harry faced the final challenge alone, entering a chamber lit by flames to find not Snape, but Professor Quirrell, his turban unwound to reveal Voldemort's face on the back of his head, a grotesque parasite sharing his servant's body. The confrontation was brief, but terrifying. Voldemort wanted the stone, wanted life, wanted power. But when Quirrell tried to seize Harry, he couldn't touch him. Lily's protection burned through Harry's skin, making Quirrell's hands blister and smoke. In the struggle, Harry's hand found Quirrell's face, and the man crumbled to dust, Voldemort's spirit fleeing, shrieking into the shadows. Harry woke in the hospital wing 3 days later, surrounded by sweets and cards, with Dumbledore sitting peacefully beside his bed. The headmaster explained about love, how Lily's sacrifice had left a mark on Harry that Voldemort couldn't overcome, how love was the most powerful magic of all, deeper and stranger than mere spells or potions. "Your mother died to save you," Dumbledore said gently. "If there is one thing Voldemort cannot understand, it is love. He didn't realize that love as powerful as your mother's leaves its own mark, not a scar, not a visible sign, but to have been loved so deeply, even though the person who loved us is gone, will give us some protection forever." Harry absorbed this, understanding more deeply than ever that his mother's love was still with him, still protecting him, still making him stronger than Voldemort could comprehend. Gryffindor won the House Cup that year, thanks to last-minute points for bravery. Harry's first year ended with cheers and celebration, with the knowledge that he'd faced Voldemort and survived. Again, second year brought whispers in the walls and a chamber of secrets. The summer with the Dursleys was predictably awful, made bearable only by Ron's dramatic rescue in a flying car. But returning to Hogwarts brought new terrors, messages written in blood on the walls. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware. Students turned to stone by something that lurked in the pipes, something only Harry could hear. A voice hissing, hungry, murderous. Harry learned he was a Parselmouth, able to speak to snakes, a rare gift associated with Salazar Slytherin and dark wizards. People whispered that he might be the heir of Slytherin, that he might be the one petrifying students. Even Ron and Hermione looked uncertain for a terrible moment before loyalty won out. The mystery deepened with the discovery of Tom Riddle's diary, a blank book that wrote back, showing Harry memories of 50 years ago when the chamber was last opened. Tom Riddle seemed helpful, sympathetic, charming. Only later would Harry understand that this was a piece of Voldemort's soul, preserved and predatory, feeding off Ginny Weasley's life force to return to power. The climax came in the chamber itself, deep beneath the castle, where Harry found Ginny unconscious and Tom Riddle's memory gaining substance, draining her life to restore his own. The basilisk, the monster in the chamber, rose from the water, ancient and enormous, its yellow eyes deadly. But Fawkes, Dumbledore's phoenix, came to Harry's aid, blinding the serpent and bringing him the sorting hat. From the hat, Harry drew the sword of Godric Gryffindor, proof that he truly belonged in Gryffindor, that he was worthy of its founder's legacy. The battle was fierce and desperate, ending with Harry driving the sword through the basilisk's mouth, a fang piercing his arm, venom burning through his veins. He would have died, but Fawkes wept on the wound, and Phoenix tears healed what should have been fatal. Harry stabbed the diary with the basilisk fang, destroying Riddle's memory, saving Ginny, proving once again that love and loyalty were stronger than the darkest magic. Dobby the house elf was freed from the Malfoy's service. Hagrid was released from Azkaban. Dumbledore returned to Hogwarts, and Harry understood more about Voldemort than ever before, understood that Tom Riddle had grown into the darkest wizard of the age, through choices, not through destiny. Third year brought The Prisoner of Azkaban and the truth about Sirius Black. Dementors patrolled the school grounds, searching for the escaped convict who was supposedly after Harry. These soul-sucking creatures affected Harry worse than anyone else. When they drew near, he heard his mother's last moments, heard her begging Voldemort to spare her son, heard her death over and over until Professor Lupin taught him the Patronus charm. Expecto Patronum. Think of your happiest memory. Channel it through your wand. Produce a shield of positive energy strong enough to repel the darkness. For Harry, the memory was simple. The moment he learned he was a wizard, the moment he discovered he had a place in the magical world. Professor Lupin became Harry's favorite teacher, kind, patient, understanding. He was also a werewolf, though Harry only learned this later, and one of his father's best friends from school. From Lupin, Harry learned about the Marauders, Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs. Lupin, Peter Pettigrew, Sirius Black, and James Potter. The four friends who'd created the Marauders map, who'd learned to become animagi to keep Lupin company during his transformations, who'd been inseparable during their Hogwarts years. The truth, when it emerged, was shocking. Sirius Black wasn't a murderer. Peter Pettigrew wasn't dead. Instead, Pettigrew had betrayed Harry's parents to Voldemort, then faked his own death and framed Sirius for it. For 12 years, Sirius had rotted in Azkaban for crimes he didn't commit, while Pettigrew lived as Ron's rat, Scabbers. In the Shrieking Shack, everything came to light. Sirius was Harry's godfather, wrongly imprisoned. Pettigrew was alive and guilty. But before justice could be done, Pettigrew escaped. Lupin transformed into a werewolf under the full moon, and Sirius was captured, sentenced to the Dementor's kiss. Harry and Hermione saved him using a time turner, going back 3 hours to rescue both Sirius and Buckbeak the Hippogriff from execution. It was strange and wonderful and dizzying, existing in two places at once, watching themselves from hiding, changing fate through careful intervention. Harry's Patronus, when he finally produced a corporeal one, took the form of a stag. His father's, animagus form, Prongs, protecting his son across the barrier of death. The silver stag drove away hundreds of Dementors, and Harry understood that his father lived on in him, in his magic, in the choices he made to protect those he loved. Sirius escaped on Buckbeak's back. a free man if not a pardoned one. Harry had family now, not blood relatives, but chosen family, connected by love and loyalty rather than obligation. Letters from Sirius would arrive regularly, signed with a paw print, reminding Harry that someone cared about him, that someone was watching out for him, that he mattered beyond what he could do or what destiny demanded of him. These years of wonder, dear listener, shaped Harry Potter from a lonely boy into a young wizard who understood the value of friendship, the power of love, and the importance of choosing bravery, even when fear threatened to overwhelm him. He learned that family wasn't just blood, that destiny could be defied, and that sometimes the greatest magic was simply refusing to give up, refusing to give in, refusing to let darkness win. Fourth year began with the Triwizard Tournament and ended with everything changed. The summer before Harry's fourth year brought the Quidditch World Cup, a magnificent spectacle of flying and magic that reminded everyone what joy looked like, what peace felt like. Harry attended with the Weasleys, camping in fields crowded with wizards from around the world, watching Victor Crumb's spectacular performance, cheering until his voice was hoarse. But the celebration ended in terror. Death Eaters attacked the campsite, conjuring the dark mark, Voldemort's sign, into the sky for the first time in 13 years. It hung there like a threat, like a promise, like a harbinger of horrors to come. The wizarding world, which had been healing slowly from the last war, suddenly remembered what fear tasted like. Hogwarts that year hosted the Triwizard Tournament, a competition between 3 schools, Hogwarts, Beauxbaton, and Durmstrang. The Goblet of Fire would choose one champion from each school, witches and wizards who were 17 or older, capable of handling the dangerous tasks ahead. But when the goblet produced a 4th name, impossibly against all rules and magical protections, that name was Harry Potter. Harry hadn't entered himself. He didn't want the attention, the danger, or the 1,000-galleon prize. But magical contracts were binding, and once chosen, he had no choice but to compete. The other students thought he'd cheated his way in, seeking more glory, more fame. Even Ron, his best friend, didn't believe him at first. The betrayal stung worse than any curse. The tournament's tasks were designed to test courage, intelligence, and magical skill. The first task required stealing an egg from a dragon. Harry drew the Hungarian Horntail, the most vicious breed, all spikes and flame and murderous intent. Flying on his firebolt, using his seeker skills, Harry retrieved the golden egg, proving he belonged among the champions despite his age. The second task demanded rescuing something precious from the depths of the Black Lake. Harry found Ron and Hermione's little sister, Gabriel, tied to the lake bed among the merpeople, hostages held to motivate the champions. Harry's nature showed itself clearly. He refused to leave Gabriel behind, even though she wasn't his to rescue, even though it cost him victory, because he couldn't bear to abandon someone who might be hurt. Between these tasks came moments of normalcy that felt precious because they were so fragile. The Yule Ball, where Harry learned that dancing could be more terrifying than dragons. Ron and Hermione's explosive argument about jealousy and feelings they couldn't yet name. Harry's first fumbling romance with Cho Chang, all awkwardness and earnestness. Laughter in the Gryffindor common room. Studying by the fire. The small, ordinary magics of friendship that mattered more than spells. But darkness crept closer with each passing month. Professor Moody, gruff, paranoid, with a magical eye that could see through walls, taught them about the unforgivable curses, the Imperious Curse, which controlled minds, the Cruciatus Curse, which caused unbearable pain, and the Killing Curse, Avada Kedavra, which produced that flash of green light Harry remembered from his nightmares. "Not nice," Moody growled, showing them the curses on spiders. "Not pleasant. And there's no counter-curse. There's no blocking it. Only one known person has ever survived it, and he's sitting right in front of me." Harry felt the weight of those words, the weight of being marked by death, by survival, by destiny he hadn't asked for but couldn't escape. The third task arrived on a warm June evening. A maze had been grown on the Quidditch pitch, its hedges 20 feet high and filled with obstacles, creatures, and enchantments. The Triwizard Cup waited at the center. Harry entered the maze alongside Cedric Diggory, the true Hogwarts champion, handsome and kind, representing everything a champion should be. Inside the maze, time lost meaning. Darkness pressed close. Strange creatures lurked around every corner. But Harry and Cedric worked together, helping each other, proving that competition didn't have to destroy compassion. When they reached the cup simultaneously, they decided to take it together. A tie, a shared victory, proof that cooperation could triumph over rivalry. They touched the cup at the same moment. It was a poured key. The graveyard materialized around them. Ancient tombstones, a yew tree, mist curling around their ankles like cold fingers. This wasn't part of the tournament. This was somewhere else entirely, somewhere dark and prepared and waiting. "Kill the spare," said a high, cold voice. Green light. Cedric fell, his eyes still open, still surprised. His life ended in an instant for no reason except being in the wrong place at the wrong moment. Harry's scream caught in his throat as Wormtail, Peter Pettigrew, bound him to a tombstone as a cauldron began to boil, as a terrible ritual unfolded in the darkness. Bone of the father, unknowingly given. Pettigrew broke open a grave, dropping a bone into the cauldron. Flesh of the servant, willingly sacrificed. Pettigrew cut off his own hand, his whimpers pathetic and horrible. Blood of the enemy, forcibly taken. Harry's arm was sliced open, his blood dripping into the potion that bubbled and steamed and began to glow. From the cauldron, Voldemort rose reborn, no longer a parasite on another's body, no longer a memory in a diary, but fully formed, fully alive, fully terrible. Red eyes gleaming with malice, skin pale as death, nostril slits instead of a nose. The most feared wizard of the age returned to power. The Death Eaters were summoned, appearing one by one in swirls of black smoke, kneeling before their master. Voldemort touched each one, naming them, some with approval, others with punishment. Then he turned to Harry, bound and bleeding and trying desperately not to show his terror. "Harry Potter," Voldemort said softly, almost caressing the name. "The boy who lived. We meet at last, properly, wizard to wizard. Your parents died begging for mercy, did you know? Your mother especially. She needn't have died. I gave her the choice. She chose to protect you instead. Such a waste." Rage gave Harry courage. "Liar. She wouldn't have begged. She died to save me, and it worked. Your curse rebounded. You were destroyed because of her love." Voldemort's face twisted. With a flick of his wand, he released Harry from his bonds. He wanted a duel, wanted to prove his superiority, wanted to kill Harry properly this time, in front of witnesses, to erase the shame of his first defeat. They circled each other in the graveyard, Death Eaters watching from the shadows. When the curses came, Harry's desperate Expelliarmus meeting Voldemort's Avada Kedavra, something extraordinary happened. The Wands brothers, connected by phoenix feathers from the same bird, locked in a golden thread of light. Priori incantatem, Dumbledore would later call it, the reverse spell effect, forcing Voldemort's wand to regurgitate its most recent victims. Shadows emerged from Voldemort's wand. Cedric appeared first, whispering urgently to Harry, then an old man, then Bertha Jorkins, and finally, James and Lily Potter, their forms ghostly but present, their voices full of love and pride. "Hold on, Harry," his father urged. "Hold on for your mother. It will give you time." "Let go," his mother whispered. "We'll hold him off. Run. Take Cedric's body. His parents deserve that much." Harry broke the connection and ran, summoning the cup, grabbing Cedric's body because Cedric deserved to go home, deserved to be mourned properly. The portkey activated, and Harry landed back at Hogwarts, still clutching Cedric, still covered in blood, while the crowd cheered and music played, oblivious to the horror that had just unfolded. "He's back," Harry gasped to Dumbledore. "Voldemort's back. Cedric. He asked me to bring him back. He's dead." The summer that followed was the worst of Harry's life. The Ministry of Magic refused to believe Voldemort had returned. They called Harry a liar, called Dumbledore a fool, launched a campaign to discredit them both. The Daily Prophet printed lies and slander. People Harry had trusted turned away, choosing comfortable denial over terrible truth. But Dumbledore believed him. Sirius believed him. The Weasleys believed him. Hermione and Ron stood by him without question. And that mattered more than all the Ministry's lies, more than all the whispers and stares. Fifth year brought rebellion, prophecy, and loss. The Ministry sent Dolores Umbridge to Hogwarts, a woman in pink cardigans with a poison-sweet voice and a hatred of anything she couldn't control. She banned practical defense against the dark arts, forced students to write with quills that carved words into their own flesh, and slowly turned Hogwarts into a prison of rules and restrictions. Harry's scar burned more frequently now, connecting him unwillingly to Voldemort's mind. He saw visions, felt emotions that weren't his own, experienced flashes of rage and cruelty that left him shaking. The connection was growing stronger, more dangerous, harder to resist. In desperation, students formed Dumbledore's Army, a secret organization where Harry taught them real defensive spells, real magic that could save their lives when Voldemort's forces came calling. They met in the Room of Requirement, that magical space that appeared only when truly needed, providing exactly what was required. Harry discovered he could teach, could lead, could inspire others to be brave, even when he didn't feel brave himself. 28 students learned to cast Patronuses under Harry's patient instruction. They mastered shield charms, stunning spells, disarming charms. They became an army not through violence, but through preparation, through the determination to protect themselves and each other when the adults in charge refused to acknowledge the danger. But Umbridge discovered them. The DA was disbanded. Harry was punished. Dumbledore took the blame and vanished from Hogwarts, leaving the school in Umbridge's vindictive hands. Everything fell apart, just as the visions in Harry's scar grew more intense, more insistent, more terrifying. Then came the vision of Sirius, tortured in the Department of Mysteries, begging for mercy, dying in the shadows. Harry couldn't ignore it. Sirius was the only family he had. The godfather who wrote him letters, who cared about him, who represented the connection to his parents' world. If Sirius was in danger, Harry had to save him. With Ron, Hermione, Neville, Luna, and Ginny, Harry flew to London on thestrals, those skeletal winged horses visible only to those who'd witnessed death. They broke into the ministry, into the department of mysteries, into a room lined with dusty glass spheres containing prophecies. Harry found the one labelled with his name and Voldemort's. But Sirius wasn't there. It was a trap. Voldemort had planted the vision, luring Harry to retrieve the prophecy that foretold their connection, their destiny, the terrible knowledge that neither could live while the other survived. Death Eaters appeared. A battle erupted among the prophecy shelves, spells flying, glass shattering, teenagers fighting for their lives against Voldemort's most dangerous followers. They fled through strange rooms, a room where time behaved oddly, a room with a mysterious veil that whispered with the voices of the dead. Then the Order of the Phoenix arrived. Sirius, Lupin, Tonks, Moody, and others, adult wizards coming to save the children who'd rushed into danger. The battle intensified. Harry watched in horror as spell after spell lit the chamber, and then Bellatrix Lestrange's curse hit Sirius square in the chest. He fell backward through the veil, disappearing beyond it with a look of faint surprise on his face. Gone. Just gone. Dead before he even hit the ground, slipping into whatever lay beyond that ancient archway. Harry's scream was silent, caught in his throat, choked by grief so profound he couldn't breathe. Lupin held him back as he tried to run after Sirius, held him while he struggled and sobbed, while the reality crashed over him that his godfather, his last connection to his parents, was dead. Voldemort himself appeared, possessing Harry briefly, trying to use him to kill Dumbledore. But Harry filled his mind with love, with memories of Sirius and Ron and Hermione, with all the things Voldemort couldn't understand. The possession broke. Voldemort fled, and the Ministry finally saw the truth. The Dark Lord had returned. Later, in Dumbledore's office, Harry learned about the prophecy. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies, and the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not, and either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. It was the weight Harry had been carrying without knowing it. The reason Voldemort had targeted him as a baby, the reason he would never truly be safe. One of them had to kill the other. There was no other ending to this story. 6th year brought memories, horcruxes, and preparation for war. Dumbledore took Harry under his wing that year, teaching him about Tom Riddle's past, showing him memories collected carefully over decades. They watched young Tom in the orphanage, charming and cruel. They saw him at Hogwarts, brilliant and hungry for power. They traced his transformation into Voldemort, his experiments with the darkest magic, horcruxes, objects containing fragments of a shattered soul, purchased through murder, hidden carefully to ensure immortality. Voldemort had made 6, more than any wizard had dared attempt, breaking his soul again and again until he was barely human at all. He feared death above all else, Dumbledore explained quietly. So he took steps to avoid it, steps that corrupted him beyond recognition. But his fear makes him vulnerable, Harry. He did not understand that there are things worse than death. He did not understand that a life without love, without connection, without humanity, is no life at all. Harry and Dumbledore hunted for horcruxes together, a locket hidden in a cave protected by terrible enchantments. Dumbledore drank poison to retrieve it, aging before Harry's eyes, weakening with each sip until he could barely stand. They returned to Hogwarts by broom. Dumbledore slumped against Harry's back to find the dark mark hanging over the castle. On the astronomy tower, Death Eaters waited. Draco Malfoy stood with his wand trained on Dumbledore, given an impossible task by Voldemort: kill Dumbledore or be killed himself. But Draco hesitated, couldn't do it, his hand shaking, his face pale with terror. Then Snape arrived. Severus Snape, the Half-Blood Prince, whose potions textbook had taught Harry so much that year. Snape, whom Dumbledore had always trusted despite his Death Eater past. Snape, who looked at Dumbledore with an expression Harry couldn't read: hatred or anguish or determination, or all three at once. Severus, please. Avada Kedavra, green light. Dumbledore fell from the tower, his broken body landing in the courtyard below. The greatest wizard of the age, Harry's mentor and protector, dead. And Harry, frozen under the invisibility cloak, could only watch as Snape fled into the night. Death Eaters following. The locket they'd retrieved revealed to be a fake, with a note signed R.A.B. saying the real Horcrux had already been stolen. The funeral took place on the grounds of Hogwarts, beside the lake, with hundreds in attendance. White flames consumed Dumbledore's body, and a white marble tomb rose to mark his resting place. Harry stood with Ron and Hermione, understanding with cold certainty that childhood was over. The war had begun in earnest, and he would not be returning to Hogwarts. He had Horcruxes to find. He had a destiny to fulfill. He had a choice to make, not whether to fight, but how to fight, and who to protect along the way. That summer, at Bill and Fleur's wedding, Harry danced with Ginny one last time, knowing he would have to leave her behind, have to let her go to keep her safe. When Death Eaters attacked the celebration, the Golden Trio fled together: Harry, Ron, and Hermione, bound by loyalty stronger than fear, ready to hunt the fragments of Voldemort's soul, even if it took years, even if it cost everything. The storm had broken, dear listener. The peaceful years were over. Darkness covered the wizarding world like a shroud. But Harry Potter was no longer the frightened boy from the cupboard under the stairs. He had learned courage from his friends, wisdom from his teachers, and love from those who'd sacrificed everything to protect him. The hardest journey still lay ahead, but he would not walk it alone. The hunt began in hiding. Harry, Ron, and Hermione disappeared into the wider wizarding world, camping in forests and on lonely moorlands, moving constantly, trusting no one. The Ministry had fallen to Voldemort's control. Muggle-borns were being persecuted, hunted, forced to register or flee. Death Eaters walked openly through Diagon Alley. Fear had settled over magical Britain like a suffocating blanket. But the trio had a mission: find the Horcruxes, destroy them, weaken Voldemort enough that he could be killed. It sounded simple when stated plainly, but the reality was exhausting, frustrating, and increasingly desperate. They had so little to work on. R.A.B., Regulus Arcturus Black, they eventually learned, Sirius's younger brother, who'd turned against Voldemort and died trying to destroy the Locket Horcrux. But where was the locket now? How could they find the other Horcruxes when Dumbledore had spent years searching, and only found 2. Hermione had prepared brilliantly. She'd packed books, supplies, even a magical tent with extension charms that made it comfortable inside. She'd modified her parents' memories and sent them to Australia to keep them safe, erasing herself from their lives completely. The sacrifice was written in her eyes every time she thought no one was watching. Their first breakthrough came when they infiltrated the ministry itself, using Polyjuice Potion to impersonate ministry employees. In Umbridge's office, that woman who tortured students now sat in a position of power, condemning Muggle-borns to Azkaban. Harry found the locket, Slytherin's locket, hanging around Umbridge's neck, radiating dark magic. They took it, exposed themselves, barely escaped with their lives, but retrieving the horcrux was only half the battle. Destroying it proved impossible. Spells bounced off. Fire didn't harm it. The locket seemed indestructible, and the worse, it affected whoever wore it. The fragment of Voldemort's soul inside whispered poison, doubts, fears, resentments. It magnified every negative emotion, turned friends against each other, made hope feel foolish and love feel false. They took turns wearing it, sharing the burden. But it was corrosive, exhausting, soul-deep wearying. Harry felt his temper growing shorter, his patience wearing thin. Ron became sullen and withdrawn, jealousy eating at him, jealousy over Harry's fame, Harry's connection to Hermione, Harry's central role in everything. And Hermione tried to hold them together, tried to research solutions, tried to keep hope alive, even as autumn turned to winter, and they seemed no closer to answers. The night Ron left, the locket's poison had finally worked. He and Harry fought bitterly, saying terrible things neither truly meant. Ron accused Harry of having no plan, of leading them nowhere, of caring more about glory than their safety. And Harry, exhausted and hurting and worn down by the locket's influence, didn't stop him when Ron disapparated, leaving them suddenly, devastatingly alone. Hermione cried for hours. Harry sat beside her tent, keeping watch, feeling like he'd failed everyone. Dumbledore had trusted him with this mission. His parents had died to give him a chance to live. And here he was, no closer to destroying Voldemort, having driven away his best friend, endangering the people he loved most. But they continued, because what else could they do? Surrender wasn't an option. Giving up meant Voldemort won, meant everyone who died had died for nothing. In Godric's Hollow, on Christmas Eve, Harry and Hermione visited his parents' graves. The churchyard was peaceful under snow, the headstones marking James and Lily Potter, simple and understated. The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death. Harry read the inscription and felt something settle in his chest. Not quite peace, but acceptance. Death wasn't the end. Love continued. Legacy mattered. But the visit turned dangerous when they encountered Nagini, Voldemort's snake, inhabiting the body of an old woman. The trap nearly killed them. Harry's wand broke in the escape, snapped in half, its magic gone. He felt bereft, unprotected, like he'd lost part of himself. Winter deepened. They camped in snow and ice, hungry and cold and increasingly hopeless. Hermione tried everything to destroy the locket, researching late into the night by wandlight. But nothing worked. They needed something powerful enough to break dark magic, something like basilisk venom, which had destroyed Riddle's diary years ago. But basilisks weren't exactly common. Then, on a frozen morning, Ron returned. He'd heard them through the deluminator Dumbledore had left him, a device that captured light and voices and led him back to his friends when he finally found the courage to return. Harry was swimming in an icy pond, trying to retrieve the sword of Gryffindor that had appeared beneath the ice. The locket around his neck was strangling him, pulling him down, trying to kill him. Ron dove in without hesitation, pulled Harry out, saved his life without thinking twice. "I'm sorry," Ron gasped. "I'm so sorry, Harry. I wanted to come back the moment I left. The locket, it made everything worse. It made me think—" "I know," Harry said, shivering. "I know what it does." The sword of Gryffindor lay between them, gleaming silver, appearing to a true Gryffindor in their moment of need. Goblin-made, it absorbed only that which made it stronger, like basilisk venom from the Chamber of Secrets. This was how they could destroy the horcrux. But opening the locket required Parseltongue, and destroying it required facing its defenses. When Ron raised the sword, the locket split open and showed him his worst fears. Harry and Hermione together, mocking him, telling him he was worthless, unloved, unnecessary. For a terrible moment, Ron froze, the poison almost working, almost breaking him. Then he brought the sword down, shattering the locket, destroying the horcrux and the fragment of soul inside it. The three of them stood in the snowy forest, whole again, stronger for having faced darkness and chosen each other anyway. Their hunt led them to Luna Lovegood's father, searching for information about the Deathly Hallows. 3 legendary objects that together made one master of death. The Elder Wand, the most powerful wand ever made. The Resurrection Stone, which could call back the dead. The Cloak of Invisibility, which Harry had inherited from his father, which had been passed down through the Potter line from Ignotus Peverell himself. The tale of 3 brothers who cheated death fascinated Harry. Was it just a story, or had the Hallows truly existed? If he found all 3, could he become Master of Death, powerful enough to defeat Voldemort once and for all? But Hermione warned him, worry clear in her voice. The stories are warning, Harry. The first brother was killed for his power. The second killed himself from grief. Only the third lived to old age, the one who used the cloak not for glory but to hide, who greeted death as an old friend when the time came. The moral is that trying to conquer death leads to destruction. Still, the knowledge changed things. Voldemort was hunting the Elder Wand, believing it would make him invincible. If Harry could find it first, deny it to him, perhaps that would be enough. They were captured by Snatchers and taken to Malfoy Manor, that elegant prison where Bellatrix Lestrange tortured Hermione, screaming questions about how they'd gotten into her Gringotts vault, what else they'd taken. Harry listened to Hermione's screams from the cellar and felt rage unlike anything he'd known. Pure, focused hatred for those who had hurt his friends. Dobby saved them. The house elf appeared when Harry called, freed them from the cellar, helped them escape. But as they disapparated, Bellatrix threw her knife, a silver blade that spun through the air and found Dobby's chest just as they materialized on a beach far from danger. Harry caught him as he fell. This small, brave elf who'd first tried to save him in second year, who'd been freed from slavery, who'd chosen to help without asking for anything in return. "Dobby is happy to be with his friend," the elf whispered. "Harry Potter." He died in Harry's arms, his eyes going dull, his magic fading, and Harry dug his grave by hand, without magic, needing to do this one thing properly, needing to honor the sacrifice of someone who'd been free and brave and loyal to the end. The headstone read, "Here lies Dobby, a free elf." They broke into Gringotts next, a desperate gamble to retrieve another horcrux, Hufflepuff's cup, hidden in Bellatrix's vault. They flew out on a dragon, the ancient creature bursting from underground, spreading wings that blotted out the sun, carrying them to freedom before plunging into a lake and leaving them soaked and laughing with the relief of survival. 4 horcruxes destroyed. 2 remained. Nagini, Voldemort's snake, and something at Hogwarts, something connected to Ravenclaw. They had to return to the school, had to search while Voldemort's forces tightened their grip on the castle. The Battle of Hogwarts began the moment they arrived. Voldemort demanded Harry be turned over. Professor McGonagall, fierce, protective, magnificent, refused absolutely and began evacuating students, while the Order of the Phoenix, the teachers, and everyone willing to fight prepared to defend the school. Harry searched desperately for the last horcrux, Ravenclaw's diadem, lost for centuries. Luna helped him understand, led him through memories and logic until they found it in the Room of Requirement, hidden among centuries of accumulated objects. But Crabbe set the room on fire with fiend fire, dark magic that consumed everything, that couldn't be controlled once released. Harry, Ron, and Hermione rescued Draco and Goyle from the flames, flying out on broomsticks as the fire destroyed the diadem behind them, the horcrux crumbling to nothing in the magical inferno. 1 horcrux left, Nagini. But then came the worst knowledge of all. Harry saw it through Snape's memories, spilling silver from the dying man's mind into Dumbledore's pensive. Snape had loved Lily Evans, had loved her from childhood, had never stopped loving her, had spent 16 years protecting Harry because Harry was all that remained of the woman Snape had loved and lost. Everything Harry believed about Snape shattered and reformed. Snape had been working for Dumbledore all along, spying on Voldemort at terrible risk, living a double life, playing a role so deep that no one knew the truth. He'd killed Dumbledore because Dumbledore asked him to, because Dumbledore was dying anyway from the curse on the Horcrux ring, because it was the only way to keep Snape's cover intact. And the final, terrible truth: Harry was a Horcrux. The night Voldemort tried to kill him as a baby, the night Lily's love rebounded the curse, a piece of Voldemort's soul had latched onto the only living thing in the room: Harry himself. The scar wasn't just a mark, it was a container for darkness, for a fragment of the Dark Lord's soul. As long as Harry lived, Voldemort couldn't die. The prophecy made horrible sense now. Neither can live while the other survives. For Voldemort to be mortal again, Harry had to die. Dumbledore had known, had raised Harry like a pig for slaughter, knowing he would have to die in the end. The betrayal felt absolute, crushing. But as Harry sat in Dumbledore's office, understanding washing over him in cold waves, he realized it wasn't betrayal at all. It was love of a different kind. The love that made impossible choices, that sacrificed to save many, that trusted Harry to be brave enough when the moment came. His mother had walked to her death to save him. Now he would walk to his death to save everyone else. The choice was simple, really. Terrible, but simple. Harry walked through the castle one last time, seeing the defenders fighting so bravely, seeing the fallen already being laid out in the Great Hall. Fred Weasley, always laughing, now silent forever. Remus Lupin and Tonks, newly married with a baby boy who would grow up orphaned, just like Harry. Colin Creevey, still barely more than a child, his camera broken beside him. So many dead, so many dying. And it would continue unless Harry ended it. He stopped by Ron and Hermione, watching them fight side by side, so brave, so loyal, so utterly dear to him. He couldn't say goodbye, couldn't burden them with knowledge of where he was going, what he was about to do. They would try to stop him, and he couldn't bear that, couldn't bear to fail in this final task because his courage wavered at the last moment. In the Forbidden Forest, walking toward Voldemort's camp, Harry opened the snitch Dumbledore had left him, the one he'd caught in his first Quidditch match, the one engraved with "Eye open at the close." The resurrection stone fell into his palm. He turned it once, twice, 3 times. They appeared around him like mist solidifying into form. His mother, his father, Sirius, and Remus. Not truly alive, not ghosts exactly, but something in between called by the stone. Present because Harry needed them, because this walk was too hard to make alone. "You've been so brave," Lily whispered, her green eyes, Harry's eyes, full of love and pride. "You're nearly there," James said quietly. "Very close now." "Does it hurt?" Harry asked, his voice small. "Dying. Quicker and easier than falling asleep," Sirius promised. They walked with him through the forest, these beloved dead, until he reached the clearing where Voldemort waited with Nagini and his Death Eaters. Harry let the stone fall from his fingers, deliberately lost in the undergrowth, because this was one hallow that did more harm than good, that tempted the living to dwell with the dead instead of living their own lives. He faced Voldemort alone, a boy of 17 facing the darkest wizard in a century, and he felt strangely calm. This was what his mother had done. This was love's final form, the willingness to die so others might live. "Harry Potter," Voldemort said softly. "The boy who lived. Come to die." Harry said nothing, simply stood there, accepting, ready. Avada Kedavra, green light, and then King's Cross Station, or something like it, bright and white and peaceful. Dumbledore sat on a bench, smiling gently, looking younger than Harry had ever seen him, looking unburdened and at peace. "Am I dead?" Harry asked. "Ah," said Dumbledore. "That's the question, isn't it?" They talked for what felt like hours or moments, time meaningless in this place between. Dumbledore explained that Voldemort's curse had destroyed the horcrux inside Harry without killing Harry himself, because Harry had faced death willingly, had sacrificed himself for others, had invoked the same ancient magic his mother had used. Love, protecting love, echoing through the years. "You have a choice," Dumbledore said. "You can board a train and move on, go forward to whatever comes next, or you can return. Finish what you started. The choice is yours, Harry. It has always been yours." A small broken thing whimpered beneath a bench, the fragment of Voldemort's soul that had been attached to Harry, now destroyed, now beyond saving. Harry felt pity for it, strange as that seemed. Then he made his choice. He would return. He would end this. He would live. Voldemort thought he'd won. He had Harry's body carried back to the castle, displayed like a trophy, proclaiming victory and demanding surrender. But Harry waited under his invisibility cloak, waited for the right moment, waited as Neville Longbottom, brave, determined Neville, drew the sword of Gryffindor from the sorting hat and killed Nagini with one clean strike, destroying the final horcrux. The battle erupted again. Harry threw off the cloak, alive, returned, miraculous. The defenders' hope reignited like a flame, thought extinguished, suddenly roaring back to life. In the Great Hall, Harry and Voldemort faced each other for the last time. No complicated spells, no elaborate magic, just two men with two curses. Expelliarmus meeting Avada Kedavra one final time. The Elder Wand, recognizing Harry as its true master, refused to kill him. The curse rebounded. Tom Riddle fell, simply a man, simply mortal, simply dead at last. And it was over. Voldemort defeated not through greater darkness, but through love, through sacrifice, through the choice to die and the courage to return. Harry Potter had walked the longest walk of all, into death and out the other side. And he'd done it not for glory or power, but for the same reason his mother had died for him. Because some things are worth dying for, and protecting those you love is the greatest magic of all. The first days after the battle were strange and surreal. Harry walked through Hogwarts in a daze, stepping over rubble, past walls that had been blasted apart, through corridors where the stones themselves seemed to weep for what had been lost. The castle that had been his first true home bore the scars of war in every hallway, every classroom, every beloved corner that would never be quite the same. The dead were laid out in the Great Hall, row after row of them, covered with sheets or cloaks or nothing at all, because there weren't enough coverings for everyone who'd fallen. Harry moved among them slowly, paying his respects, remembering faces, feeling the weight of each loss settle onto his shoulders like stones. Fred Weasley, whose laughter had filled so many rooms. Remus Lupin, the last connection to his father's generation of marauders. Tonks, whose hair had changed colours with her moods. Colin Creevey, who'd hero-worshipped Harry from the first day they met. Lavender Brown, Severus Snape, whom Harry had hated and who had loved his mother for 17 years in silence. Each name was a story ended, a future stolen, a light extinguished. The Weasleys gathered around Fred, and Harry watched Mrs. Weasley stroke her son's hair with shaking hands, watched George sit silent and hollow-eyed beside the twin who'd been part of him since before birth. The grief was too large for words, too profound for comfort. Harry stood nearby, wanting to help, and knowing nothing could help, knowing that time would soften the edges of this pain, but would never truly heal it. He found Ron and Hermione in a corner of the Great Hall, sitting close together, holding hands, exhausted beyond measure. They'd been fighting for hours, had seen friends fall, had come so close to dying themselves. Now they simply sat, too tired to move, too overwhelmed to speak. Harry joined them, and they sat in silence, the three of them who'd faced everything together. No words were needed. They'd survived. They'd won. They'd lost so much in the winning that victory felt hollow. But they had each other, and that would have to be enough. "I need to do something," Harry said finally, his voice rough. "I can't just sit here." "What?" Ron asked. "I don't know. Help repair the castle. Search for survivors. Something. Anything." So they worked. They helped move stones, repaired walls with magic, searched through rubble for anyone who might be trapped. It was physical, mindless work, and it helped in ways that sitting still never could. The motion kept the grief at bay, kept the reality from crushing them under its weight. Professor McGonagall, now Head Mistress McGonagall, though she hadn't asked for the position, organized everything with her characteristic efficiency. She arranged for the injured to be transported to St. Mungo's. She contacted families. She set up wards around the school to keep out journalists and curiosity seekers. She made lists of what needed repair, what needed replacement, what could be salvaged, and what was lost forever. When she found Harry levitating stones back into place, her stern face softened. "Mr. Potter," she said quietly, "you should rest. You've done enough." "I haven't done anything," Harry replied. "They did everything. They fought while you walked to your death to save us all," McGonagall interrupted firmly. "I know what happened in the forest, Harry. We all know. You have earned your rest." But rest felt impossible. Every time Harry closed his eyes, he saw the battle, heard the screams, felt the curse hit him, stood in that bright, peaceful version of King's Cross, and chose to return. The memories were too fresh, too raw, too overwhelming to face in stillness. Ginny found him on the 7th floor corridor, trying to repair a section of wall that had been blasted open. She didn't say anything, just took out her wand and helped him, working side by side in comfortable silence. They'd barely spoken since the battle ended. There'd been no time, too much chaos, too many urgent things demanding attention. "Your mum," Harry said eventually. "Is she?" "Holding together," Ginny said. "Barely. Dad's the same. George won't talk to anyone. But we're Weasleys. We'll manage. We always do." Her voice was steady, but her eyes were red from crying. Harry wanted to hold her, to comfort her, to promise that everything would be all right. But he couldn't make promises he wasn't sure he could keep. And he felt strangely distant from everything, like he was watching his own life from somewhere outside his body. "I'm glad you're alive," Ginny said softly. "When I saw Hagrid carrying you, I thought—" Her voice broke. "I know," Harry said. "I'm sorry. I couldn't tell anyone. I couldn't—" "I know why you did it," Ginny interrupted. "I understand. But Harry, you can't keep carrying everything alone. You're allowed to need people. You're allowed to be human." The words settled into Harry's chest, heavy and true. He'd spent so much time being the boy who lived, the chosen one, the hero everyone needed him to be. He didn't know how to just be Harry anymore. Didn't know if he'd ever learned in the first place. The funerals stretched across weeks, each one a fresh wound. Fred's funeral was held at the Burrow, and the late May sunshine felt like an insult against the family's grief. George gave the eulogy, his voice breaking repeatedly, talking about his twin, his best friend, his other half. "He died fighting," George said. "He died protecting the school we loved. He died laughing, because of course he did. Fred Weasley wouldn't know how to die any other way." People laughed through their tears, remembering Fred's jokes, his pranks, his irrepressible joy. It was a celebration as much as a mourning, which felt right for someone who'd spent his life making others laugh. Remus and Tonks were buried together, side by side, their son Teddy, just weeks old, with his mother's eyes and his father's quiet strength already visible, held by his grandmother, Andromeda. Harry stood as godfather, holding the baby carefully, feeling the weight of responsibility settle over him like a cloak. This child would grow up without parents, just like Harry had. But unlike Harry, Teddy would know he was loved. Harry would make certain of that. "I'll tell him about them," Harry promised Andromeda quietly. "I'll make sure he knows how brave they were, how much they loved each other and him." "I know you will," Andromeda said, her face lined with grief, but her voice steady. "You're a good man, Harry Potter. You'll be exactly the godfather Teddy needs." Between funerals, Harry gave testimony at the ministry. The new minister for magic, Kingsley Shacklebolt, needed statements about Death Eaters who'd fought at Hogwarts, about those who'd been under Imperious curses versus those who'd participated willingly. Harry tried to be fair, tried to remember who'd fought and who'd fled, who'd protected students and who'd tried to kill them. When it came to Narcissa Malfoy, who'd lied to Voldemort in the forest and told him Harry was dead, giving Harry the chance to return under his cloak, Harry spoke in her defense. "She saved my life," he said simply. "Whatever else she did, she deserves credit for that." The Malfoy family received clemency, not freedom from consequences, but mercy, a chance to rebuild, to prove themselves different from what they'd been. Draco, pale and shaken, nodded to Harry once across the Ministry atrium, a gesture that wasn't quite thanks, but was something close to acknowledgement. Summer passed slowly, a season of healing. Harry stayed at the Burrow with the Weasleys, helping with repairs, spending long days working in the garden, flying on his firebolt over the countryside, trying to remember what peace felt like. The Ministry offered him rewards, titles, positions, an Order of Merlin, first class, a job as an Auror, despite not having completed his newts, a place of honor at every ceremony and celebration. He accepted the medal because refusing would have been insulting to those who'd fought beside him. But he declined the celebrations, the speeches, the constant attention. "I just want to be normal for a while," he told Kingsley. "I just want to breathe." Ron and Hermione stayed at the Burrow too, the three of them inseparable as always. They didn't talk much about the war, about the horcrux hunt, about the things they'd seen and done. Instead, they played chess and exploding snap. They helped ding-gnome the garden. They flew together, laughing when Ron fell off his broom, trying to show off a new move. Slowly, gradually, the weight began to lift. The nightmares came less frequently. The hypervigilance, the constant checking of escape routes, the inability to sit with his back to a door, began to ease. Harry started to sleep through the night without jerking awake, one drawn, ready for Death Eaters who were no longer coming. Ginny was patient with him, giving him space when he needed it, staying close when he wanted company. They took long walks through the countryside, talking about everything except the war. She told him about her hopes for playing professional Quidditch, about wanting to travel, about plans for a future that suddenly felt possible again. "I love you," Harry told her one evening as they sat by the pond behind the Burrow, watching the sun set in shades of gold and rose. "I've loved you for so long, but I couldn't. I didn't think I had the right to love anyone when I might not survive." "You do now," Ginny said simply, taking his hand. "You survived. You get to live now, Harry. You get to be happy." The concept felt foreign, almost forbidden. Happiness had always seemed like something other people deserved, something Harry could help create, but not experience himself. But here, with Ginny's hand in his and peace settling over the countryside like a benediction, he began to believe it might be possible. By September, Hogwarts had been rebuilt. The castle stood proud and whole again, its walls repaired, its towers restored, magic woven through every stone to make it stronger than before. Professor McGonagall had worked tirelessly all summer, coordinating the repairs, hiring new teachers, preparing for the students who would return. She offered Harry, Ron, and Hermione the chance to return for their 7th year, to complete their education properly. Hermione accepted immediately. Of course she did. unable to imagine not finishing her schooling. Ron was less certain until his mother made it clear this wasn't optional. He was going back. End of discussion. Harry hesitated. Part of him wanted the normalcy of classes and homework, wanted to experience Hogwarts in peacetime, wanted the life that had been stolen by war. But another part of him felt too old for school, too changed by what he'd seen and done. How could he sit in potions class after hunting horcruxes? How could he care about exams after walking to his death? "You're only 17, McGonagall told him gently. "You've earned the right to have a normal year, Harry. To just be a student. To experience Hogwarts the way it was meant to be experienced. Without Dark Lords, without battles, without carrying the world on your shoulders." In the end, Kingsley convinced him. "Take the year," the minister said. "Complete your education. The Aura program will still be there when you're ready. And you'll be a better Aura for having finished properly, for having learned everything Hogwarts can teach you." So Harry returned to Hogwarts for an 8th year, along with many others who'd missed their final year fighting in the war. It was strange being back in the castle he'd nearly died defending, sleeping in the Gryffindor dormitory, attending classes as if nothing had changed when everything had changed. But it was also healing, learning magic for the sake of learning, not because lives depended on it, playing Quidditch because it was fun, not because it was escape, studying with Hermione in the library, helping Ron with his potions essays, joking with Neville and Luna and Ginny. This was what he'd fought for. This ordinary magic, these small joys, the ability to be young without being at war. Professor Slughorn resumed teaching potions, and Harry found himself actually enjoying the subject without Snape's looming presence. He visited Snape's portrait in the headmaster's office sometimes, saying the things he'd never gotten to say in life. "Thank you, I understand now. I'm sorry. I named my son after you because you were the bravest man I ever knew." The portrait Snape would nod curtly, uncomfortable with praise even in death. But Harry thought he saw something soften in those painted black eyes. Harry took Teddy to visit Remus and Tonks graves every month, telling the baby stories about his parents, even though Teddy was far too young to understand. "Your dad taught me to cast a Patronus," Harry would say. "Your mum could change her hair to any colour she wanted and usually chose bright pink. They loved each other so much, and they loved you more than anything." When Teddy turned 2, his hair changed colour for the first time, bright turquoise, and Harry laughed with delight, sending a Patronus message to Andromeda immediately to share the news. Being a godfather, Harry discovered, meant carrying grief, but also carrying joy, honouring the dead by loving their child, by making sure their legacy lived on. After Hogwarts came the Aura training. Harry, Ron, and Hermione all joined the program together, though Hermione's heart was clearly more in policy than fieldwork. She wanted to change laws, improve rights for magical creatures and muggle-borns, reform the ministry from the inside. But she completed the training anyway, always thorough, always excellent, always pushing herself to learn more. The training was grueling. 3 years of constant study, physical conditioning, magical combat, dark creature defense, investigative techniques. But it was also purposeful. Harry was good at it, discovering that the skills he'd learned, hunting horcruxes, translated well into tracking dark wizards, that his instincts saved lives, that he could make a difference in smaller ways than defeating Dark Lords. He partnered with Ron most often, the two of them working together with the ease of years of friendship. They tracked down remaining Death Eaters who'd escaped justice, dismantled dark magic artifacts, investigated suspicious deaths. It was satisfying work, purposeful, giving Harry a way to channel his need to protect people into something constructive. And slowly, gradually, life took shape. Harry rented a flat in London, filled it with comfortable furniture and photographs of friends and family. He dated Ginny properly, taking her to dinner, going to her Quidditch matches, meeting her after training to walk through the city holding hands. They talked about the future tentatively, carefully, both aware that they were young, but also aware that they'd already lived through more than most people experienced in a lifetime. "I want a family," Harry admitted one night as they sat in his flat, eating takeaway and watching the lights of London through the window. "I want kids who grow up knowing they're loved, who never have to sleep in cupboards, who get to be children without being soldiers." "We'll have that," Ginny said confidently. "When we're ready, when the world feels safe enough. We'll have it, Harry." Hermione and Ron moved in together after completing their aura training, their relationship having evolved from bickering to banter to something deeper and more lasting. Hermione took a position in the department for the regulation and control of magical creatures, immediately beginning a campaign to improve house elf rights. Ron continued as an aura, though he complained constantly about the paperwork. The Golden Trio remained close, having dinner together weekly, spending holidays at the Burrow, surrounded by Weasleys, sharing the small details of their lives with the people who'd saved them and whom they'd saved in turn. Years passed, gentle and full. Harry proposed to Ginny on the Quidditch pitch at Hogwarts, the place where he'd first discovered he could fly, could be free, could be more than the unwanted boy from Privet Drive. She said yes immediately, laughing and crying, kissing him under the goalposts as the sun set behind them. They married in a small ceremony at the Burrow, surrounded by family and close friends. No press, no public spectacle, just the people they loved watching them promise forever to each other. Harry's vows were simple. "You make me believe I deserve happiness. You make me want to be better. You make me feel like I'm home." Ron and Hermione married a year later, their ceremony slightly larger, featuring a memorable best man speech from Harry that made everyone laugh and cry in equal measure. Children came, James Sirius first, named for two men who'd loved Harry fiercely. Then Albus Severus, named for two headmasters who'd shaped his destiny. Finally, Lily Luna, named for his mother and the friend who'd always believed in impossible things. Harry was a devoted father, patient and present in ways his own father had never gotten the chance to be. He read bedtime stories, taught his children to fly, answered their endless questions about magic. He never raised his voice in anger, never made them feel unwanted, never let them doubt for a moment that they were loved beyond measure. When James asked about the scar on Harry's forehead, Harry knelt down to his son's eye level and said gently, "It's from a very dark wizard who tried to hurt me when I was a baby. But my mother loved me so much that her love protected me, and that love is still protecting me now. Love is the most powerful magic there is." Harry took his children to visit graves, his parents, Sirius's, Remus and Tonks. He told them stories about the people they were named after, about bravery and sacrifice and love that transcended death. He wanted them to understand where they came from, what had been given up so they could live in peace. Ron and Hermione had Rose and Hugo, and the cousins grew up together, as close as siblings. The burrow remained the center of family gatherings, now even more crowded with grandchildren, filled with more laughter and more love than ever before. Harry became head Auror eventually, leading the department with fairness and wisdom, remembered not for the Dark Lord he'd defeated, but for the way he treated everyone with respect, the way he gave second chances to those who deserved them, the way he never let power corrupt him. He revolutionized Auror training, incorporating Muggle investigation techniques, emphasizing de-escalation over aggression, teaching young Aurors that their job was to protect everyone, even suspects, even people who'd made mistakes. "We're not here to be heroes," he told each new class of trainees. "We're here to serve, to protect, to make the wizarding world safer for everyone. And sometimes that means arresting people, but sometimes it means helping them. It always means treating them like human beings." Hermione rose through the ministry ranks, eventually becoming Minister for Magic herself, the youngest ever, the first Muggle born, bringing changes that modernized the wizarding world, improved rights for all magical beings, and helped heal the rifts that had led to war in the first place. Ron left the Aurors eventually to help George run Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, discovering he had a talent for the business that surprised everyone, including himself. The joke shop thrived, bringing laughter to a world that had known too much darkness, keeping Fred's legacy alive in the most fitting way possible. On platform 9 3/4, 19 years after the battle, Harry stood with Ginny and their children, preparing to send Albus off to Hogwarts for the first time. His son was nervous, worried about being sorted into Slytherin, worried about living up to his name. Harry knelt down, looking into eyes that mirrored his own, his mother's eyes, passed down through generations, still green as fresh, pickled toads. "Albus Severus," he said gently, "you were named for 2 headmasters of Hogwarts. One of them was a Slytherin, and he was probably the bravest man I ever knew. But just say, then Slytherin House will have gained an excellent student, won't it?" Harry smiled. "But listen, if it really matters to you, you can choose Gryffindor. The sorting hat takes your choice into account." "Really? It did for me." Albus's face cleared, relief and wonder mixing in his expression. The train whistle blew, and the children scrambled aboard, hanging out of windows to wave goodbye. Harry watched his son disappear toward his own adventures, his own friendships, his own story. Ginny took his hand. "He'll be fine," she said. "I know," Harry replied. "I just wanted for him to have an easier time than you did," Ginny finished. "He will, Harry. They all will. You made sure of that." And it was true. The wizarding world Albus was entering was different from the one Harry had known. Safer, kinder, more just. There were still problems, still prejudices to overcome, still work to be done. But the war was over. The darkness had been defeated. Children could go to Hogwarts and just be children, could learn magic without learning fear, could grow up knowing they were protected. Harry had given them that. Not by defeating Voldemort, though he'd done that too, but by choosing every day since to be kind rather than bitter, to build rather than destroy, to love rather than hate. His scar had not pained him for 19 years. All was well. As the train pulled away, carrying his son toward the future, Harry felt his mother's love still wrapped around him like an invisible shield, felt his father's pride in the man he'd become, felt the presence of everyone who'd fought and died so this moment could exist. He was no longer the boy who lived. He was simply Harry Potter, husband, father, friend, living the ordinary, magical life he'd fought so hard to win. And that, dear listener, was the greatest victory of all. The years continued to unfold like pages turning in a beloved book. Harry's children grew, each finding their own path through Hogwarts and beyond. James Sirius soared into Gryffindor, inherited his namesake's mischievous spirit, but tempered it with kindness his father had taught him. Albus Severus, after much deliberation by the Sorting Hat, joined Slytherin House and proved that houses didn't define character, choices did. Lily Luna, fierce and bright, became a Gryffindor chaser and eventually played professionally, making her mother proud. Harry attended every parent-teacher conference, every Quidditch match, every school play and concert. He walked the halls of Hogwarts as a parent rather than a student, seeing the castle through new eyes, not as a battlefield, but as a school, not as a place of survival, but as a home for learning and growth. Professor McGonagall, eventually retiring after decades of service, would sit with Harry in her office, no longer the headmistress's office, but simply her office, and they would drink tea and talk about his children, about changes in the curriculum, about how the castle felt different now, lighter, as if even the stones themselves were healing from the war. "You did that," McGonagall told him once, her stern face softened by age and affection. "You gave us peace, Mr. Potter. You gave us the chance to be a school again, not a fortress." "We did that," Harry corrected gently. "All of us who fought, all of us who survived, all of us who chose to rebuild instead of retreating into bitterness." The portraits in the headmaster's office, now Headmistress Clearwater's office, the position having passed through several capable hands after McGonagall, had become Harry's quiet confidants over the years. Dumbledore's portrait, with its twinkling eyes and gentle wisdom, offered advice on parenting, on leadership, on balancing duty with humanity. Snape's portrait remained taciturn, but Harry thought he detected approval when Harry spoke about Albus's sorting into Slytherin, about how his son was proving that house prejudices were relics of a darker time. "Your son has your mother's mind," Snape's portrait said once, the highest compliment he could give. "He thinks before acting, a valuable trait in a Slytherin, or anyone." Harry smiled, understanding the peace offering for what it was. "He has her eyes too," he said quietly. "Every time I look at him, I see her looking back." The portrait nodded once, something like contentment crossing its painted features, and said nothing more. The wizarding world continued to evolve under Hermione's leadership as Minister for Magic. House elves gained the right to wages and fair treatment, though many chose to continue serving because they genuinely loved the work. But now it was choice, not compulsion. Werewolves received protections under law, access to Wolfsbane potion, and freedom from the discrimination that had plagued Remus Lupin's life. Muggleborns were celebrated rather than persecuted, their fresh perspectives valued as bridges between the magical and non-magical worlds. The Department of Mysteries established new regulations around dangerous magical artifacts. The veil that had claimed Sirius was sealed behind additional wards, studied but never again used. its whispers silenced. The time turners were destroyed, all of them, because some powers were too dangerous to exist, even with the best intentions. Harry supported every reform, every change, every step toward a more just society. He testified before the Wizengamot when needed, lending his voice and his fame to causes he believed in. But he never sought political power for himself, content to serve as head aura, to train new generations of law enforcement, to protect rather than govern. "You could be minister," Kingsley told him once, years after his own retirement. "The people would elect you in a heartbeat. You're already a legend." "I don't want to be a legend," Harry replied simply. "I just want to be useful. Being an aura lets me help people directly, one case at a time. That's enough for me." And it was. Harry found satisfaction in the small victories, stopping dark wizards before they could hurt anyone, rescuing magical creatures from illegal traders, investigating suspicious disappearances, and bringing closure to worried families. Each case mattered. Each person saved was a testament to the peace they'd fought for. Teddy Lupin grew into a remarkable young man, his metamorphogus abilities making him distinctive, but his character making him beloved. Harry had been present for every milestone. First day at Hogwarts, first Quidditch match, he played Seeker like his godfather. Graduation, first job as an aura trainee. The relationship between godfather and godson was close, built on trust and genuine affection rather than obligation. Teddy visited often, joining the Potter Weasley gatherings at the Burrow, becoming an unofficial older brother to Harry's children. When Teddy began dating Victoire Weasley, Bill and Fleur's daughter, the family's connections deepened further, weaving together into something even stronger than blood. "Your parents would be so proud of you," Harry told Teddy at his aura graduation, both of them wearing dress robes, standing in the same ministry atrium where Harry had once fought for his life. "You have your father's wisdom and your mother's joy. You're exactly the person they hoped you'd become." Teddy's hair flashed through several colors, an emotional reaction he couldn't quite control, before settling on a dignified brown. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said quietly. "You gave me what they couldn't: time, presence, someone to come home to. You gave me family." Harry embraced him, this young man who carried his parents' legacy forward, who proved that orphans could thrive when surrounded by love, who showed that family was built through choice and care as much as through blood. The anniversaries of the Battle of Hogwarts became days of remembrance rather than celebration. Every May the 2nd, the wizarding world paused to honor those who'd fallen. At Hogwarts, students and teachers gathered in the Great Hall for a ceremony that was solemn but not morbid, sad but not despairing. Names were read aloud. Every single person who died fighting Voldemort, from famous heroes to unknown defenders who'd simply been in the wrong place and chosen to fight anyway. Harry attended every year, standing with the survivors, remembering the faces of the dead, speaking their names into existence so they wouldn't be forgotten. Fred Weasley, Remus Lupin, Nymphadora Tonks, Colin Creevey, Lavender Brown, Severus Snape. The list was long, each name a story ended too soon, a future stolen. But the ceremony ended not with grief but with light, thousands of candles floating into the enchanted sky of the Great Hall, rising like gentle stars, carrying with them messages of love and memory and gratitude. It was beautiful and heartbreaking and necessary, a reminder of the cost of peace, a promise to never forget what had been sacrificed. "We remember so we don't repeat," Hermione said once, speaking to a crowd of students who'd never known war, who'd grown up in the peace their parents had won. "We honor their sacrifice by choosing differently, by building bridges instead of walls, by seeing in every person their humanity first, their house or blood status or differences second." The students listened, perhaps not fully understanding yet what the war had cost, but learning, absorbing, carrying forward the lessons written in blood and sacrifice. As Harry aged, as silver appeared in his black hair and lines deepened around his green eyes, he found unexpected peace. The nightmares that had plagued him for years after the war eventually faded, replaced by ordinary dreams, dreams of flying, of his children laughing, of quiet moments with Ginny. His scar remained, a lightning bolt on his forehead that had become simply part of his face rather than a mark of destiny. It never hurt anymore, never burned, never connected him to darkness. It was just a scar, a reminder of where he'd been and how far he'd come. He and Ginny grew older together gracefully, their love deepening rather than fading with time. They traveled when his work allowed, visiting magical communities around the world, seeing the places his parents had dreamed of visiting but never got the chance to see. They walked through Muggle London holding hands, like teenagers. They had quiet dinners at home and loud dinners surrounded by family. They built a life that was ordinary and extraordinary in equal measure. Ron remained Harry's best friend, the brother he'd chosen, the person who could make him laugh even on the hardest days. They played chess regularly. Ron still won almost every game, and Harry still didn't mind losing. They told stories about their aura cases, embellishing shamelessly for comedic effect. They complained about getting older, about their children making them feel ancient, about how Quidditch moves that used to be easy now left them sore for days. "Remember when we could fight Death Eaters and barely feel tired the next day?" Ron said once, rubbing his back after a training exercise. "I'm not sure that was ever true," Harry replied, laughing. "I think we've just forgotten how much everything hurt." "That's called getting old, mate." "That's called peace," Harry corrected gently. "We get to be old because we survived. That's a gift, Ron. That's what we fought for." Ron was quiet for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, you're right. Though I still think my back shouldn't hurt this much." Hermione became the longest-serving Minister for Magic in modern history, her reforms changing the fundamental structure of wizarding society. When she finally retired, having served with distinction for over 2 decades, the entire wizarding world celebrated her contributions. Harry was there, of course, watching his friend receive accolades she'd always deserved, remembering the bushy-haired girl who'd bossed them around on the Hogwarts Express and thinking that she'd always been destined for greatness. "We couldn't have done any of it without you," he told her at her retirement celebration, the 3 of them stealing a quiet moment away from the crowds. "Not the Horcrux hunt, not defeating Voldemort, not building this peace. You were always the brightest witch of our age, Hermione. You still are." She hugged him tightly, tears in her eyes. "We did it together," she whispered. "We always did everything together, the Golden Trio." "Always," Ron agreed, joining the embrace. And standing there, the 3 of them holding each other like they had so many times before, Harry felt the full weight of gratitude for the friendship that had saved him, shaped him, made him who he was. Harry's grandchildren began arriving, and he discovered that being a grandfather was perhaps the greatest joy of all. He taught them to fly on toy broomsticks that hovered just inches off the ground. He told them stories about their parents' adventures at Hogwarts, carefully edited to remove the truly terrifying parts. He answered their questions about magic with infinite patience, remembering his own first confused days in the wizarding world. He made them feel safe, loved, wanted, all the things he'd craved as a child, and made sure every child in his family received without question. When James Sirius's daughter, named Rose Lily, for both grandmothers, asked about the scar on Grandpa Harry's forehead, he knelt down and told her the same thing he'd told all his children. A bad wizard tried to hurt me, but my mummy loved me so much that her love protected me, and that love is still protecting me, and protecting you, and protecting everyone in our family. Love is the strongest magic there is. Stronger than any spell? Rose Lily asked, her eyes wide. Stronger than any spell, Harry confirmed. Never forget that, sweetheart. Love is what matters most. The burrow remained the heart of the family, though it had been expanded magically several times to accommodate the growing number of Weasleys and Potters and their various spouses and children. Holiday gatherings were chaotic and loud and perfect, children running everywhere, adults trying to have conversations over the noise. Mrs. Weasley's portrait she'd passed peacefully in her sleep at 93, surrounded by family, smiling down at them all from above the fireplace. Harry would sit in the garden sometimes, watching the organized chaos, marveling at how much had changed since he'd first visited this magical home. The boy who'd grown up in a cupboard now sat surrounded by family, by love, by the legacy he'd built not through fame, but through choosing kindness every day. As Harry approached his 70s, he began to slow down, as all people eventually do. He retired from the Aura program, having served for over 40 years, having trained hundreds of auras, having shaped the department into something that protected everyone equally. His retirement party was enormous. Former students, current auras, ministry officials, and friends gathering to honor his service. "I was just doing my job," Harry said in his speech, uncomfortable as always with too much attention. Trying to make the wizarding world safer for everyone. Trying to make sure no child ever has to face the darkness alone. Trying to build something worth protecting. He paused, looking around at the faces gathered. Some he'd trained, some he'd saved, some he'd simply worked alongside for decades. But I couldn't have done any of it alone. Everything I accomplished was because people stood beside me, believed in me, helped me be better than I was. So thank you, all of you, for making the peace we fought for real. The applause was thunderous, but Harry was already looking for Ginny in the crowd, finding her eyes, seeing pride and love reflected back at him. That was what mattered. Not the accolades, not the fame that still followed him, but the life they'd built together, the family they'd raised, the love that had sustained him through everything. In his later years, Harry spent more time at Hogwarts, not as a student or a teacher, but as a living connection to its history. The castle had become, in many ways, his truest home, the place where he'd first felt belonging, where he'd made his deepest friendships, where he'd learned what family could be. He walked the corridors slowly now, remembering. Here was where He'd first met Ron and Hermione on the moving staircases. There was the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom, where Lupin had taught him to cast a Patronus. Down that passage was the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets, sealed now but still remembered. The Astronomy Tower, where Dumbledore had fallen. The Great Hall, where so many battles of magic and will and heart had been fought. But the castle wasn't a museum of tragedy. It was alive with new students, new stories, new magic being learned and discovered every day. Children who knew of Voldemort only from history books ran laughing through halls that had once echoed with screams. They played gobstones where Death Eaters had once stood. They fell in love in corridors where people had died. And that, Harry understood, was exactly as it should be. The past informed the present, but didn't define it. The castle had healed, and so had the world. One spring evening, in the year of his 78th birthday, Harry stood at his bedroom window in Godric's Hollow. He and Ginny had moved there a decade earlier, buying the cottage where his parents had lived, rebuilding it with love and care, and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and rose and gentle purple. His scar caught the light, that lightning bolt that had defined so much of his life. But looking at it now in the mirror, Harry felt no pain, no darkness, no burden. Just a mark that showed where he'd been, what he'd survived, who he'd become. Ginny joined him at the window, her hair more silver than red now, but her spirit unchanged. She took his hand, their fingers intertwining automatically after a lifetime of practice. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. "Everything," Harry said. "My parents, who I never got to know, but who loved me enough to die for me. Sirius and Remus, who tried to give me family. Dumbledore and Snape, who shaped my path even when I didn't understand it. Ron and Hermione, who stood beside me through everything. You who taught me I deserved happiness. Our children and grandchildren, who get to grow up in peace." He paused, his voice growing quieter, more reflective. "I think about the boy I was, scared and alone in a cupboard, not knowing what he was, why strange things happened around him, where he belonged. And I think about how far he came, how much he found, how much he was given by people who loved him." "You gave them just as much," Ginny said. "You gave all of us a world worth living in." Harry shook his head gently. "We gave each other that, all of us together. Love did that. Choice did that. The decision made over and over again to be kind instead of cruel, to build instead of destroy, to hope instead of despair." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink below the horizon, the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the village, children played. Somewhere, families were sitting down to dinner. Somewhere, a young witch or wizard was discovering magic for the first time, feeling wonder bloom in their chest, the way Harry had when Hagrid first told him he was a wizard. The world turned, life continued, and love, patient, persistent, powerful love, held everything together. Years later, when Harry Potter's time finally came, it was gentle and expected. He passed peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by family, in the cottage where his parents had loved him, where his story had truly begun. The wizarding world mourned naturally. Harry Potter, the boy who lived, the chosen one, the wizard who defeated Voldemort, was gone. But the mourning wasn't desperate or hopeless. It was respectful, grateful, celebratory even, because Harry had lived fully, had loved completely, had given the wizarding world decades of peace and wisdom and leadership, His funeral was held at Hogwarts in the Great Hall, because where else could it be? Thousands attended, family, friends, former students, auras he'd trained, people he'd saved, people whose lives had been touched by his in ways large and small. But the ceremony wasn't somber. Following Harry's own wishes, it was a celebration of life rather than a mourning of death. Stories were told, funny ones, heroic ones, ordinary ones that showed Harry not as a legend, but as a man who'd chosen kindness every day. Music played, people laughed through their tears, candles floated into the enchanted sky, thousands upon thousands of them, each one carrying love and memory and gratitude. Albus Severus, now a distinguished potions master at Hogwarts, gave the eulogy. "My father," he said, his voice steady despite his grief, "never wanted to be famous, never wanted to be a hero. He just wanted to protect people, to make sure no one felt as alone as he'd felt in that cupboard under the stairs, to build a world where children could be children, where love was valued over power, where everyone, regardless of house or blood status or past mistakes, deserved kindness." He paused, looking at the portrait that would soon hang in the headmaster's office. Harry in his aura robes, his green eyes bright behind his glasses, his expression gentle and knowing and at peace. "He succeeded," Albus continued. "Not because he defeated Voldemort, though he did that. Not because he was powerful, though he was, but because every single day of his life after the war, he chose love. He chose forgiveness. He chose to be better than his pain, kinder than his past, more hopeful than his circumstances suggested he had any right to be. That's his legacy. Not the boy who lived, not the chosen one, but Harry Potter, who lived well, who loved deeply, who showed us all that the most powerful magic isn't cast with wands. It's choosing every day to be human, to be kind, to be the light in someone else's darkness." The great hall was silent for a long moment. Then, as if moved by some invisible signal, everyone present, young and old, witch and wizard, muggle-born and pure-blood, lit their wands, raising them in tribute. The light was brilliant, overwhelming, beautiful, and in that light, Harry Potter's legacy glowed eternal. His portrait hangs now in the headmaster's office at Hogwarts, alongside Dumbledore and Snape, McGonagall, and all the others who shaped the school's history. Portrait. Harry doesn't give grand speeches or cryptic advice. He mostly just watches students come and go, smiling gently, occasionally offering a word of encouragement to a struggling first year or a worried seventh year facing newts. Sometimes, late at night when the castle is quiet, the portraits talk among themselves. Dumbledore's portrait asks how Harry's grandchildren are doing. Snape's portrait makes sarcastic comments that make Harry's portrait laugh. McGonagall's portrait reminds them both to maintain appropriate dignity, though she's usually smiling when she says it. And sometimes, painted Harry looks out at the castle he loved, at students sleeping peacefully in their dormitories, at professors working late in their offices, at house elves happily preparing breakfast in the kitchens, at all the ordinary magic that happens every day in this extraordinary place. "All is well," portrait Harry whispers into the painted night. And it is, because of him, because of everyone who fought beside him, because of love that transcended death, because of choices made freely, because of the simple, profound truth that even the darkest night gives way to dawn. So ends our story, dear listener. The boy from the cupboard under the stairs who became a hero, who defeated darkness not through power alone, but through love, who built a life worth living in the peace he fought so hard to win. Harry Potter's journey took him from loneliness to belonging, from fear to courage, from survival to truly living. His mother's love protected him. His father's legacy inspired him. His friends sustained him. His choices defined him. And in the end, he proved that the most powerful magic of all is the decision to love even when it hurts, to hope even when it's hard, to keep choosing light even when darkness seems overwhelming. Let us rest now in this knowledge, dear listener. Let the story settle into your dreams, like snow falling gently on the grounds of Hogwarts. Let Harry's journey remind you that love endures, that kindness matters, that every choice to be gentle in a harsh world is its own kind of magic. Sleep now and dream of platform 9 3/4, of letters arriving by owl, of discovering your magical in ways you never imagined. Dream of friendship that lasts lifetimes, of love that conquers death, of ordinary people doing extraordinary things simply because it's right. Dream of Hogwarts, where portraits whisper wisdom in the darkness, where candles float eternally in enchanted ceilings, where generations of students learn not just spells, but how to be brave, how to be kind, how to choose love over fear. And know, dear listener, that Harry Potter's story continues, not in battles or darkness, but in every person who chooses kindness, in every child who's told they're loved, in every ordinary moment of extraordinary grace. The boy who lived became the man who taught us all how to live. Rest well, dear listener. May your dreams be peaceful, your heart be light, and may you always remember